The girl sat on the wooden bench of the dusty train station, a bundle of worn clothes clutched tightly in her lap, eyes darting from face to face as the passengers rushed past her. She had been promised someone would come, someone who knew her name, someone who cared. But as the afternoon sun dipped lower, the space around her remained empty. The conductor looked at her with pity, the station master shook his head, and townsfolk walked by, whispering. She was just a child, abandoned in a place that had no room for the lost. Her heart pounded as she tried not to cry, but the truth settled like a stone in her chest: no one had come to claim her. Sheriff Daniel Hayes, a man carved from loss and duty, watched from the doorway of his small office across the street. His wife had died 3 winters ago, leaving behind silence where laughter once echoed. He had buried himself in law work, patrolling the dusty trails, breaking up saloon fights, and protecting a town that gave him respect but no longer gave him joy. Yet something in that girl's trembling shoulders tugged at him harder than any badge of honor. He crossed the street, boots heavy against the boards, hat pulled low against the glare. When he stopped in front of her, she lifted her eyes, wide, brown, and filled with a pain he recognized. He asked her name. She whispered, "Clara." And that was how everything began. The townsfolk gossiped the moment the sheriff carried the girl's bag and led her toward his home. Some said it was foolishness. What was a lawman to do with a stray child who had no kin? Others whispered it was dangerous. What if she was the product of trouble no one wanted to claim? But Daniel didn't care. He saw too much of himself in Clara's silence, in her eyes that watched the world as though waiting for it to shatter again. He gave her a room that once held the belongings of a woman he loved and lost. It felt strange, even wrong at first, but as Clara smoothed the quilt and touched the wooden frame of the bed, something softened in him. For the first time in years, the house was no longer empty. Clara, though grateful, carried shadows. At night she would cry quietly, muffling the sound in her pillow. She had been left too many times, first by parents she barely remembered, then by an aunt who promised to return and never did. Trust did not come easily to her. She waited for Daniel to send her away, certain he would grow tired of her presence. But instead, he began to include her in his days. She walked beside him when he made rounds, fed his old horse, and learned to cook simple meals in the worn kitchen. Slowly, the edges of her fear began to soften. Yet deep inside, she wondered, what if he was only keeping her until someone else claimed her? The sheriff faced his own battles. Grief was a quiet enemy, always whispering in the corners of his mind. There were days when the sight of Clara's small shoes beside the door made his heart ache with memories of the child he and his wife had lost years ago, taken by fever before she could even walk. Sometimes he wondered if he was helping Clara or using her to fill the emptiness. But when she smiled, hesitant at first, then brighter each day, he realized it wasn't about filling a void. It was about giving both of them a chance at something new. Still, the past was heavy, and moving forward was never easy. The town didn't make it easier. One afternoon, when Clara walked to the store with a coin Daniel had given her, the shopkeeper's wife muttered that she was just an abandoned girl, not worth the sheriff's protection. Clara's cheeks burned as the words pierced her like arrows. She ran home, slammed the door, and refused to eat. When Daniel found her curled on the bed, shaking, he sat down beside her. He didn't promise that people would always be kind, because they wouldn't. Instead, he told her that family wasn't always blood, and that sometimes it was the ones who stayed when no one else did. Slowly, she lifted her eyes, and for the first time she believed him. As the months passed, Clara began to change. She laughed more, she helped Daniel polish his badge, and she tended to the small garden behind the house with a determination that reminded him of his late wife. Still, there were moments when her fears returned. Every time a stranger rode into town, she tensed, wondering if this was the day someone would claim her and take her away. She didn't know which frightened her more, the thought of belonging to strangers or the thought that no one would ever come at all. And Daniel, though he tried to reassure her, also knew the law: if kin appeared, they had the right to take her. That test came sooner than either expected. One autumn afternoon, a man rode into town, claiming to be Clara's uncle. He was rough-looking, with liquor on his breath and greed in his eyes. He said Clara's parents had died owing him money, and now he wanted the girl. Clara froze when she saw him, memories flooding back of nights filled with shouting and fear. The townsfolk watched closely, whispering as the man argued with Daniel outside the saloon. Legally, the man had some claim, but Daniel's gut told him the truth. This was not family, this was danger. The choice weighed heavy on his shoulders: uphold the law as written, or protect the child who had begun to heal under his roof. That night, Daniel prayed for the first time in years. He asked for guidance, for strength, for courage to do what was right even if it cost him everything. Clara sat at the table, pale and silent, her hands clenched around a cup of tea. She didn't ask him for promises, but her eyes begged him not to let her go. Daniel reached across the table, covered her hand with his, and told her he would fight. For the first time, Clara believed that maybe she was worth fighting for. It was a moment that stitched something new between them, not obligation, not pity, but love. The next day, Daniel confronted the so-called uncle in front of the judge. He presented evidence of neglect, stories Clara had bravely shared of nights she had gone hungry, of blows she had endured. The judge listened, the town listened, and Clara stood beside Daniel, trembling but unbroken. When the ruling came, the man was denied custody and ordered out of town. Clara's knees gave out with relief, and Daniel caught her before she fell. The whispers in town changed that day. No longer was she just an abandoned girl. She was the sheriff's girl, and no one would question it again. Life after that was not perfect, but it was theirs. Clara still had nightmares, and Daniel still had nights where grief threatened to drown him. But together they built something steady. He taught her how to ride a horse with confidence, how to shoot a rifle safely, and how to face the world without fear. She taught him how to laugh again, how to see hope in small things, and how to believe that even broken hearts could mend. Their home, once a place of silence, became a place of warmth and laughter. The garden grew, the horse neighed happily, and neighbors began to see not just a sheriff and an orphan, but a family. Years later, Clara would look back on the day no one came to claim her and realize it was the day her life truly began. She hadn't been abandoned, she had been led to where she was meant to be. And Daniel, the widowed sheriff who once believed his best days were behind him, discovered that love doesn't always return in the ways we expect. Sometimes it comes as a second chance, small and fragile, sitting alone on a bench in a dusty train station. All it takes is the courage to reach out, to open a door, and to choose to stay.